When I got my first teaching job, I could not wait to set up the classroom. Imagining the way my classrooms had looked as a child, I quickly began collecting materials, putting up brightly colored bulletin boards with wildly colored borders, bringing in rugs, setting up seating, and then I began teaching my class. My classroom decor was just a background. It wasn't interactive, and to be honest, it was a little bit overstimulating and overwhelming. So I began to make some changes. I took all the bulletin boards and I made them all the same color with the same color border. Okay, a little bit calmer. Then I looked at the overhead lighting and I decided to bring in lamps to make it calmer. Now it was getting a little bit better. I put up student work, but it was finished work. It didn't really show the process of learning, and students didn't really pay too much attention to it. So it got me thinking, and it got me asking more questions about the environment. And it made me wonder, in particular, how does the environment impact the learner? And how does the learner shape the environment? I began to dig deeper into learning about the environment as a third teacher, coming from the Reggio Emilia approach, and thinking about how the environment could play the role of another teacher within the classroom. I wanted an environment filled with inquiry and innovativity, a place where students asked questions and sought out answers, an opportunity for students to have choice and voice in what they do, an environment that truly felt alive. A quote that has rung true for me throughout this process comes from Loris Malaguzzi, who says, "The space is an aquarium that mirrors the ideas and values of the people who live in it." It made me think that with every year, with every group of students and educators within the space, that the environment wouldn't be static, but ever evolving, changing with the community and individuals within that particular space and time. Putting this philosophy into practice, the space began to take on new forms. But first, this meant having rich, authentic materials. One of my favorites would be loose parts. So loose parts are anything you can take apart and put together in endless ways. So for example, things like sticks, rocks, gems, fabric, blocks. And throughout the year, I'm also always collecting recyclables. I ask families to send them in, things from yogurt cartons to lids. Our spaces are always well stocked with recyclables. And as you can see, they provide endless opportunities to create, to make, and to construct. I've also collected broken technology, including projectors, phones, computers. Students love using broken technology for imaginative play as well in the early years. And whether they're pretending to type at desks or talk on the phone, they are recreating and sharing their understanding through their play, providing us an opportunity to learn how they see technology within our world. Not to mention the learning that happens when students discover what's inside a computer by taking it apart, and the amazing puzzle it becomes when you try to put it back together again. Speaking of technology, we cannot forget about actual working technology. When integrating technology, I always think about the learning first. What will allow students to tinker, to question, to collaborate, and to create? Always addressing the why before putting the technology into place. The next thing I like to do is make sure that the specific tools in the space allow students to easily access them. Things they might need like glue, scissors, screwdrivers, paint, colored pencils, and hot glue guns. building confidence in students as they access real tools independently when they need them. The last thing I like to do before a space is ready is to play in it as an educator. It is important to take time to explore the space and possibilities it inspires and provokes. I love to think of all the potential opportunities I see with the materials and then watch students come in and take it a completely different way. Okay, so now the environment is set up with materials. But let's see, what does that look like in a project? So one day, I observed my kindergarten students building a school with blocks and loose parts. To give a little bit of context, these were 5- and 6-year-olds, and they were part of a wider school community. Students ranging from the age of 3 all the way through 12th grade in one building. And they began recreating the parts of the school together in which they felt connected with. So that would include places they visited frequently, like the gym, the playground, the music room, and of course, their homeroom classroom. By using these loose parts, recyclables, and they even printed out photographs they'd taken from iPads, they created their classroom from the smallest of details to show where their cubbies were in order, the rugs, the calendar, and they even created several different versions of their teacher. I'm still not sure which one looks quite the most like me. They began drawing pictures of themselves and taping their drawings onto blocks to make themselves stand up. And they played with these newly made figurines together. They then decided to bring them to life by creating stop motion videos, showcasing the way they moved through a space, whether they were going to music class or sliding down a slide. Throughout the process, this school was built and rebuilt so many times because blocks fell down, as they do. And you could see the front of the building, I think, was rebuilt maybe 5 times as students debated and discussed which way quite looked the most like the front of our building. Students even made signs to set up around the school to show students to carefully move around the block school as to not knock it down. During this project, it was easy to see the literacy, the mathematical thinking, as well as so many essential skills that were happening simultaneously throughout this process. Students even began adding drawings of buses to blocks, showing them driving to their own homes through stop motion. As you could see, it could go on for a long time. The open-ended materials provided students the opportunity to share their understanding of the relationships and connections that happen within a wider community and their identity as a group and individual within that space. Another way our environments have been transformed is through the inspiration of nature. Now, nature, it's truly its own curriculum. It opens windows and doors to our inner curiosities. And some of my most memorable moments as an educator have been in seeing the joy and sense of wonder with students in nature. It's led to some of the most interesting projects by connecting our worlds, bringing the outside in. For instance, the discovery of a spiderweb on a nature walk led to an entire project around spiders and a spiderweb being recreated within our space. Students collaborated to bring the web from one side of the room to the other, all while making sure it stayed above their teacher's head, problem solving different ways to attach, unravel, and adjust by wrapping around, knotting, and even using sticky tack or Play-Doh to try to hold the web up. There was a continuous buzz from these 3- and 4-year-olds working together in a hands-on way, learning that the different methods they used, they might not all work, and through failed attempts, learning how to keep their web from falling down. As the web grew, students began adding more and more detail, not just to the web, but they began writing stories, role-playing as spiders, and having deeper discussions about spiders. Students who initially thought spiders were scary or ugly, they began to recognize that spiders were a valuable part of our natural world. Another project, inspired by nature, was our underwater world that began on a sunny day at the fjord, leading to questions about the different living things within the water. As we observed shrimp, starfish, and crabs. It brought us back into the classroom and took our space from this to this, creating our own layers of the ocean. Students began to make different sea creatures out of recyclables. One student even created a seagull with its legs by breaking apart popsicle sticks. Using wrapped up scrap paper and paint, she hung the legs from the ceiling to show a unique perspective of the ceiling as the top of the water, with the seagull's legs hanging below. Another student showcased his love for hammerhead sharks by carefully constructing one out of cardboard scraps and paint. One of my favorite parts of this project, though, was the depths of discussion about caring for our planet and ocean. By reusing materials and thinking about limiting our waste. So utilizing our school environment, nature, and using authentic, rich materials within our spaces has opened up endless opportunities for learning. But what happens when suddenly your learning environment changes drastically? On March 10th, 2020, we received the phone call that we would not be returning to campus for an unknown amount of time. Now, this happened while we were in the middle of a project that had come from trying to understand what makes us alive. Students had been constructing a loose part skeleton to share the different features they believed made them alive. One of my favorite parts was the brain that was constructed on this project. 2 students worked together to make this brain. One said, "I think our brain looks like a rainbow inside. It's very colorful and tells us what to do." Another said, "No, our brain is like a computer and it tells us exactly what to do." One student used colorful wire for the brain while the other added a component from a broken piece of technology and put it on top of the wire to construct this brain. Then we began to dive into remote learning, reflecting on where we were and where we might go. And as we began having small group video chats, it became apparent right away. As one student said, "We can see into everyone's home." The environment was now the home. And as teachers, we needed to explore this environment. So students, they began to create using materials from around their homes. I think this was a great opportunity for families to see just why we were always asking for them to send in recyclables, as now their children were using the recyclables within their homes. We explored our homes in relation to living things. asking what else is alive within our homes, diving deeper into the connections, relationships, and sense of identity we had within our homes. And as we began these explorations, we saw the depth of connections students had within their homes. They began sharing the relationships between family members and pets, showing what made them both alive and even how they were a bit different. They shared what made them feel alive, and I love how one student even shared that she felt alive when she was dancing with her dad. Getting a glimpse into students' lives outside of school. Something we had never thought of doing in this particular way, and something in particularly unique to this time. But what an incredible way to learn about our students and families. As educators, our partnership with parents became even greater during this time. We were vulnerable on a level of letting families into our own homes and having families let us into theirs. We learned how vital the communication was in our one-on-one phone calls with parents. Expressing empathy and gratitude during such a period of time where everyone was navigating a new environment. Whether teaching remotely, returning to classrooms with new guidelines, or even spaces without, it cannot go undenied that the environment plays a role of making learning authentic, meaningful, and providing opportunities for students to share their individual identity as well as the collaborative identity of a group. Imagine walking into a space where your ideas are not only valued, they are displayed, where creativity is not just allowed, it's celebrated, where projects you are working on through collaboration or individually don't have a specified end date that you will have to meet, but rather a natural ending when you are ready to move on, just learn something new, or the ability to take something deeper. Your voice is heard, and the process of your thinking is seen as your ideas have come to fruition. How might this shape the way in which you learn? In what ways might you reimagine your environment?